Well, the regular season is over for the Boise State football team, but I don't know if we have ever had more to talk about here on Jay and Dave's Sports Bar, because what a week it's been. Boise State getting ready to play in the Mountain West Conference title game. Chris Petersen has retired. The All Mountain West Conference awards are out. Boise State did very well. Plenty to cover today.
When I was like pulling up in the parking lot, I was like, oh, we're going to record. I started taking notes on my phone about what we should talk about. And I thought the same thing as you. I was like, oh my God.
Mm-hmm.
Like, we usually try to be as concise as we can, which isn't always easy.
Yeah.
But with the amount of stuff we have, I was like, wow, we should have booked the studio for like 2 hours.
Gonna have to hit it and move on. He's Dave Southern of The Athletic. I'm Jay Tuss, the sports director over at KTVB. By the way, I think I said Petersen retired. I can't use that word.
Yeah, I guess not technically.
So another R word. Chris Petersen recharging, because that's what he said he's going to do.
Resigning from his post?
Recharging, all of that stuff. We're going to have more on that here in a little bit. We'll start off, with the Boise State football team, because we cover them each and every day of our lives. The Broncos did what I would consider pretty well on the Mountain West postseason award selections. They were released moments before our podcast actually began. Three deserving guys, maybe one snub. Where do you want to begin?
Let's go with the deserving guys, just because there's three of them.
Mm-hmm.
And that's and I kind of alluded to it when I was kind of thinking about it over the weekend. Mm-hmm. when you and I were voting and we were talking about it. I think I tweeted about it. I thought, as much as, sometimes fans kind of get upset about, they don't get enough love from the conference.
Yeah.
They don't get a lot of players of the week and all that stuff. I thought they had a legit shot at pretty much getting every award except for Offensive Player of the Year. And they almost did. Curtis Weaver was a no-brainer for Defensive Player of the Year. He's got a career high in sacks this year and tackles for loss. And the guy has been, a focus of every single offense now.
Yep. I mean, that's the thing. Curtis has produced an incredible clip, and he is a huge focus of opposing offenses and how they attack Boise State.
And don't forget, Jabril Frazier was a first-team All-Conference guy last year too. Not that, like, because he was on the other side that just made it easier for Weaver. It probably did at times. Mm-hmm. And vice versa, of course. Now he's, teams are focusing on him, and he's still killing it. He got a pick last week at Colorado State. And he's, he was the preseason Defensive Player of the Year, postseason Defensive Player of the Year. No-brainer. Avery Williams, 2-punt return touchdowns. What tipped it for him, he's blocked 2 kicks, which is, Avery always told us, and the way he said it, it was definitely not cocky. He said, special teams is my gift to the team. Mm-hmm. He said that to us multiple times.
And again, I want to reiterate this, Dave. He not in a cocky manner at all. He just recognizes his place.
Yeah.
He wants to be a special teams demon.
Yep, that's exactly it.
I mean, like most people, there's some people out there, running backs, are like, no, give me 40 carries a game. There's wide receivers out there like, give me 15 targets a game. I'm going to make a difference. Yeah. Avery's just the type of guy that's like, he circles special teams in addition to his normal cornerback role, but he circles special teams as the place that he's going to bring the energy. He's going to be a difference maker, and he has been.
It's like when you go on TV and you're like, this face is a gift for you all. Right? That's pretty much what it is.
Legitimately, I've never said that.
You're like, I know my place. I'm
going to stand here and look at the camera for 2 minutes.
You just stare. I'm having fun. I really am. And then the freshman of the year was George Holani, which, if Hank Bachmeier started the whole season, you could have a good debate about who would get that award.
If he started the whole season, Hank Bachmeier would probably be the Offensive Player of the Year. And I say that because
you probably have a good case.
I say that because if Boise State's 11-1 and he would have just continued on his projected numbers, he probably would have won Offensive Player of the Year, because the guy that did torched Boise State was one of the top passers in terms of passing yards per game in the country. His quarterback efficiency rating, honestly, kind of mediocre for today's standards. I mean,
for Josh Love,
I would say, Josh Love. I would say, most times, 130 to 140. I think back in the day was considered average. I'd say 150 is average today.
Yeah.
I mean, the production people get out of that position is just
the completion
changed.
Percentages are now pretty ridiculous.
Exactly. So, but his teams went 5-7, and he's not. And Josh Love is, they're not even going bowling. So, if Hank Bachmeier would have been here, not only would he contended for the Freshman of the Year award, but he really might have contended for Offensive Player of the Year award. And now he's a number 2 quarterback. Oh, we need to talk more on that too.
God,
man, a big week.
How much time do you guys got this week?
We'll have to talk really fast.
And so I was going to say that if he was in, but last week on this exact program, we did talk about how we were like, what about Donald Hammond?
Yep.
He wasn't even nominated.
Pump the brakes here.
Yeah.
A guy that probably, Dave, man, I'm not going to lie, like, okay, watching the end of the San Jose State game and Fresno State's winning, and I'm like, I just can't vote for a guy who plays on a 4-8 team. Like, I'm sorry, like, and not only a 4-8 team, but they would have finished dead last in the division. Now they still finished tied for last in the division, but I still felt like it was just enough for me. Like 5-7, you miss a bowl by one game, it is what it is.
If you know, though it is funny to say this now, even though he won it, and I voted for him, if he hadn't thrown 4 picks against UNLV, they would have been bowl eligible.
Yeah.
And he threw 8 picks all year. So he had 4 in one game.
Dave,
and it's for the amount they throw and the fact that their run game was
atrocious,
comically bad, that he didn't have that helping him out.
Yeah.
So that always entered my mind.
Yeah, because I hate to be so critical, but you're right about the UNLV game. I mean, that should have been their swing game to get them bowl eligible, and they didn't do it. And his play was kind of a reason why. Now
he did throw for 465, but
I was just gonna say he also really carried that offense in all of their wins. So
it
is what it is. But getting back
to
our point,
if they didn't have him, they would have won like one game.
Terrible. Getting back, and he turned. He produced a couple of all-conference wide receivers too. But getting back to our point, it still would have been very competitive whether I would have voted for him and Hammond from Air Force. And he not only was he not even up for Offensive Player of the Year, he wasn't even up for first team all conference quarterback selection. I mean, not even his own position. I don't know what happened there. Like, I don't know if there was an accidental omission or whatever it was, but man.
I did see a tweet from Brent Brigham, who covers them for the Gazette down in the Springs, and he mentioned that they're always very selective with who they nominate.
They
nominated 3 linemen, which again probably says something about Troy Calhoun. I don't know. But yeah,
he should have been up for the award.
So I know we talked about it, and then once we got the ballots and he wasn't on there, you can go and disregard our conversation from last week.
The one thing we did say though is we talked about Avery earning Special Teams Player of the Year award, and that was one of the. I was kind of hesitant on that. I mean, like I really do think if you look at his numbers, he is as unique as any Special Teams player in the country in terms of his production. I'm sorry, but there's a lot of guys out there that have made 18 field goals this season. You know, so
and
if you want to kind of gravitate towards uniqueness, Avery was the guy. I didn't think that many people outside of Boise would back him just because. I mean, really, Utah State and San Jose State were the only teams that saw him be super dynamic on special teams. UNLV, I guess, with the onside kick that he almost returned for a touchdown.
Yeah, there you go. I honestly forgot about that.
Yeah, but I just thought that maybe he wouldn't get the recognition he deserved outside of Boise, but clearly he did.
Yeah.
And he was he's the first player in program history, regardless of conference, right, to earn Special Teams Player of the Year award.
I think so. And they've had some really good special teamers. Orlando Skandrick should have won it for all the blocks he had. But there wasn't like a lights out kicker. You know, Cooper Roth and Dominic Eberle.
But they all had better seasons last year.
They all did, right? Exactly. If one of them was nails and like you said was hitting at like a 95% clip and was bombing 50-yard field goals, might have had an argument there. No one did, and so Avery was actually like a no-brainer for me, even though Scarver's had 2 kickoff return touchdowns. Avery did 2 on punt return.
My tiebreaker there, by the way, in terms of I'll let you go there.
No, I want you to say it.
There's been 9 guys with multiple kickoff return touchdowns.
There's only one.
There's only one, and it's Avery with multiple punt return touchdowns. It's just harder to return punts than it is kickoffs. And I mean, both are incredibly hard. Your chances of scoring on either are not good at all.
My chance of even catching the ball wouldn't be that great.
Right, exactly. But I had returned punts for a little bit in high school. It is so much harder than people think.
Oh, it's terrifying.
And it's the spiral ones.
Yeah.
The spiral's like knuckle. Yeah. I actually was cool with the end over ones because you could somehow predict where they were going more. But when a kicker got it off his foot and it spiraled, it would knuckle in the air at times.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I mean, I was in like junior high, and even then it was terrifying. But he, and then the blocks, and I even forgot about the almost returning it against UNLV on the onside. So no brainer there.
Yep.
But the only one that I think is really going to have any sort of debate is Coach of the Year. It was Nick Rolovich. well deserved. I mean, I have no huge qualms with it.
Yeah, that's a program that they deal with significant disadvantages.
They do.
Not only their travel schedule, but their budget concerns. I think I saw something where they are closer on cost of attendance stuff now than they once were.
I remember we talked about that a little while
ago. But there's still a gap.
Yep.
I mean, there still is.
And Rolovich makes $600,000 a year,
which is, all things considered, even low for Mountain West standards.
It's a third of Brian Harson's salary.
I mean, look at it that way.
Yeah. So so when you add in those factors, then it's
for them
fine.
to get to 9 wins. Looks super impressive.
They beat 2 Power Fives this year.
It's weird to me that they will play 15 games.
Yes. Yeah.
They won't play in the college football national championship,
right?
But they will play in 15 games.
That's true. And the thing I thought was going against them was they got beat 3 times by 22 or more points, and the other loss they lost to a team, Fresno State, at home, where that team didn't make a bowl game.
Yeah.
I went with Brian Harsin. I wrote about it this morning. Story ran today, just thinking that this was the best coaching job he's done.
Yep.
And Boise State's never had a Mountain West Coach of the Year. They still haven't. And they haven't had one since 2009.
I think that, full transparency, I voted for Brian Harsin too. And I think it's I feel like I'm being critical when I say lazy, because I don't want it to come off that way at all. But I just do think that there's a perception that it's Boise State. They're supposed to win.
Oh, there is.
We don't really even need to get into the storyline of how they do it so much. They got 11 wins. They've done this before.
Yep.
But when you look at how they've been able to navigate and get to 11 wins, the waters have been way more turbulent than they have in years past. And he was able to successfully navigate them and get them to this point with a third-string quarterback. I want to bring up an error in Aaron Wars' email today.
Uh-oh.
Yeah, I've got to call him out.
He's going to have your legs broke.
And that's okay. I get it. But he called him a number 1 running back in his email. Fantastic email, loaded with information, 1,500 words. But clearly on the depth chart, it says that George Holani is the third-string running back, David.
Number 3.
So
David, that's when my mom was mad at me. That's when you knew.
I just felt like I needed to point that out.
Very fair. And
By the way, in all actuality, Aaron's email is way more accurate than the depth chart they put out, because there's no way he's the number 3 running back.
Great point.
I'm kidding.
Yeah, and well, I mean, if we want to jump into that combo real quick, number 1 quarterback is Jalen Henderson. I asked Harsin about how Hank Bachmeier's handling it. Hank goes 7-0. And he's a true freshman. You went with him since day 1. Now he's your backup, and Harsin's insistent that he can play.
And let's say this again, Dave. He is the backup right now.
Yeah.
Like it's no longer a situation where from the sounds of this whole thing, it's no longer a situation of where we're waiting on guys to get healthy. Everybody can play right now. And the man that's not only starting games, but now is officially number 1 on the depth chart is Jalen Henderson, with true freshman Hank Bachmeier as the number 2 quarterback.
Yep.
And you have to ask yourself, how many times has Hank ever been in this situation in his life?
I mean, there's a reason he threw for so many yards in high school, because he probably started. I think he started as a freshman. He did, and so he, I asked how he's handling it. I mean, yes, I wrote a nice story about Brian Harsin today, but I don't always agree with what he does. And he said you'd have to ask him, but you're not going to be able to. But he. But I was inquisitive about that,
Yeah.
I mean, like, not like I'm saying, is he going to transfer or whatever, but that has to be a weird situation for a kid who is a true freshman.
Yeah.
And he gave an answer, and then right after that, you go, so is it crazy to look into the depth chart that Jalen's number 1? And then Harsin was like, nope.
So just to give you a little more context to this, I mean, we were just joking around about George Holani being the third-string running back on the depth chart that we get every week. He still is the number 3 running back. He's clearly the number 1 running back. I mean, it is not even close anymore.
Yeah.
I mean, there was a little while there where it was like, oh, maybe he is, maybe he isn't. Who knows? He is 100% the first-string running back for Boise State now. So we can only look at this depth chart and take things with a grain of salt. What I would say, all the way up to 98% of the time, This week we landed somewhere in the 2% of the time where there actually is a meaningful change that we can read into.
Yes, there's something to glean from it. There's a reason I tweeted about it because I saw like some people were like, oh, Quevedo is listed as the first team right guard. Oh, he has been all year, even when he's hurt. And the reason that I think the fans notice that is because it's like we don't tweet it out every week anymore because it never changes.
Yep.
There's a reason that it was notable this week.
Yep. And so that's why sometimes when you get an answer from him, from Coach Harsin, you just kind of listen to it and you kind of weigh it with how he's answered stuff in the past or how he might approach it in the past, and you're like, it's not going to mean anything. But seeing as how he answered your question, and I don't want to get into the eyes of this because somebody else probably would have asked it, but I was sitting next to you and I went for the follow-up. And
well, it's fair because we're doing this podcast together for you to say this. I'm serious.
Okay,
Go ahead.
Well,
yeah.
so but you just followed up with, can we read into this thing? And he was like as open and honest about his starting quarterback as he's been in months, Dave, on a Monday press conference.
Ever.
Yeah.
No,
maybe ever.
Ever. Because it was when Hank Bachmeier, when I asked him, and he's like, he'd be the starter today. And it took 6 questions until he said he'll start at Florida State. So this was the most open he's been all year.
Yeah. But he said, he was absolutely, you can read into it. It says what it says right there. Jalen's earned this opportunity.
And we talked to Zach today, to Zach Hill, the OC, and Zach basically kind of, sometimes he's been hesitant to say some of the stuff because Harsin usually is a team spokesman, right?
Correct.
Injuries, things like that. He just said today, he was just like, we're going with the hot hand. It was cut and dry. The guy, they had the hot hand.
When we say hot hand, though, like in this case, I don't think that very many people out there would argue with you. Like,
no.
And this might, I'm sorry if this comes off as mean, but who is the more talented quarterback?
Between Harsin, Zach Hill, and it's Hank Bachmeier.
It's Hank Bachmeier. Who do they believe is the future?
Hank Bachmeier.
2020 season ticket billboards all over town have Hank Bachmeier on them.
Yeah, it's true.
They clearly believe in the kid.
Yes.
At the moment, though, when they're riding with the hot hand, it also has to do with just momentum, character, and belief, I think. And right now, they have momentum. They love Jalen Henderson's character. And I'm not saying that the guys don't believe in Hank. We saw it earlier this year. Like, all the guys love the guy.
Yeah.
But there is just a belief right now about Jalen Henderson that it's just creating something unique.
Yes. I mean, whatever it is, I can't put my finger on exactly what it is because it's not like they're chucking the ball all over the place.
They're not.
In the last game, he did
a lot of it's like even like the shovel pass offense, and I kind of knew that I wasn't going to get very far with that with Brian Harsin this week.
I just want to say real quick.
Yeah.
You mentioned that. I've made it my thing now on this podcast. Like, I'm a t-shirt guy, so like each week I have a different one.
Yeah.
The one I'm wearing today is because of this. So go ahead.
Oh.
I want you to explain it.
Find out more about this.
Yeah.
But they have had a lot of success with the shovel pass. And I asked Brian about it, and he kind of gave me like, what are you talking about? And I'm like, am I like referring to this as the wrong thing? Like, do they have a different terminology for it now? I don't know. But he's talking about, like the fly motion stuff. And I'm like, yeah. And you kind of shovel the ball to the guy in front of you.
Little touch pass.
And whatever. But you get where I'm going with it. And, he said it's the highest percentage pass you could possibly complete because it's 2 inches in front of you. But, the point is that you're trying to utilize the width of the field there.
Correct.
And they have operated that with a lot of success, in particular with Jalen Henderson at quarterback.
Yep.
I'm not a football guy, so I can't tell you why it's been so effective, but it has been.
So if you go back in the time machine about 5-ish years ago, West Virginia crushed Clemson in the Orange Bowl.
Okay.
Crushed them.
Okay. It had to have been at least 5 years ago.
They ran that play, I think, like 5 times, and they scored 4 touchdowns. So after the game, they asked Dana Holgorsen about it, and he says, I picked that up from my friend Bob Stitt at the Colorado School of Mines in Golden, Colorado. That's why I'm wearing that shirt today. Because I knew we were going to bring this up.
Okay.
And so I'm a nerd about some of that stuff. Where did something come from? And so, like, that play had been around, but it really hit the the mainstream with that game. And every time Boise State runs it, I just chuckle to myself, and I think of Blaster the Burrow, the the mascot. They were 12-0. They lost in the D2 playoffs last week, by the way. They were 12-0 though. Like they still run a similar offense there. It's fun as hell to watch. But anyway, it's been very successful for Boise State, as you said.
Let me ask you this too. And if you look at the last couple of games with Jalen starting at quarterback, hasn't taken a lot of sacks, hasn't taken a lot of hits. And I wonder if they like that. You're not taking negative plays.
Turnovers.
You're getting the ball out quickly, so you're not hanging on to it. And I mean, sometimes when Hank would do that, man, it would result in big, awesome plays. So I think there's a give and a take there, but you know, I don't know. I don't know what it is. I wish I was in the minds of those guys who knew the game like they know the game. I don't know if that's the reason why, but I think that this has more to do right now with some of the intangibles that Jalen's bringing to the table versus the tangibles. I mean, I think that's an obvious case here.
I think it's just a product of who he is. You know, I mean, I don't want to say Hank's going to be the gunslinger type, but you know, he was going to. It was obvious since day one. The stuff we talked about, and sometimes maybe coaches or other people were like, "Why are you making a big deal out of this?" This is exactly why. Exactly why. He put himself at risk for getting hurt, getting hit. What is the cost benefit of staying in the pocket like that? With Henderson, and Zach said it basically, he hasn't turned the ball over. He hasn't made big mistakes. That's part of the reason that they love sticking with him. They've been running the ball better. That helps. But also, there was a play against CSU when the way he moved around in the pocket.
He's just got this little way about it,
He ducked one, and then another dude was coming and was just going to light him up. Threw it, hung it up just a little bit, but Hightower still got it. And like his footwork, the way he moved around the pocket, I was like, oh my God, like that was incredible. In fact, he even got the ball off, let alone completed it. Was pretty impressive. And so you could see that right there is a little bit of a distillation of what he's about. And you know, Hank was similar, but I think just right there was just kind of like, now I see why they're going with Jalen Henderson. Even when they hit a little bit of a rut in the third quarter of that game. You saw some people were like, well, okay, time to put Hank back in. But it's like, no, guess what? He let him do a touchdown drive.
Dave, this is actually leads us to our next point. And I don't have a shirt to convey this. Dang it. Or add some new layer to the story.
It's like my new hometown school. So.
But another reason why I think that they are riding with Jalen right now. Think about the starts when he's been at quarterback. 42 points at halftime against New Mexico. 42 points at halftime against Utah State. And that was a 42-7 lead. Even at Colorado State, 24 first half points. Good total of first half points. At times, this team just had slow starts. And especially on the road, they had slow starts. Well, with Jalen, they have not had slow starts. In fact, in each of his 3 starts, he has led them on an opening series touchdown drive. We were halfway through the season.
Cord.
When what game was that?
Both games, I thought.
Both games. Yeah.
But he couldn't maintain it.
But we were halfway. He couldn't maintain it. And we were halfway through. You're right. They looked great against BYU on the opening drive and great against Wyoming on the opening drive. And he couldn't maintain it. Right. Jalen, for the most part, and the offense has been able to maintain it. As great as Hank was, like at times, and it's not all the defense plays a part of this equation too. Duh. But sometimes they got off to slow starts. And so it's better to play from in front than it is behind, I think, or at least it's less risky.
No, it's logical and it is successful for a reason.
I think if you don't fall behind too, you can play a little bit of a different approach or style on defense.
Absolutely.
I think it's a challenge right now to. I mean, the way that this looks, and I know that we play a part of this, Dave, because we have to write stories and we have to report. But facts are facts. Jalen's the number 1 quarterback right now, and Hank Bachmeier's not. It's going to be difficult to control the narrative, and so it doesn't truly seem like Hank's not as good as Jalen or received a demotion or any of that stuff. Because Hank Bachmeier is the future of this team. I mean, he is a great quarterback. And it's just an interesting time. It's just an interesting time.
They still haven't signed another one.
And they still haven't signed another one. Yeah.
So, I mean, it's like you've seen a flurry of offers for other quarterbacks. I personally wonder if there was an issue with Hank Bachmeier. We'd be seeing a lot of quarterbacks get offered right now. I haven't seen it. We'll see. I mean, signing day's in 2 weeks, but Hank can't be excited about this development. But
another thing, like, why would you want him to be?
Right. And that's kind of what they said. Is
you're
like
a competitor. Like
they don't want someone to just accept it.
Yeah. I mean, I'd be more concerned if you just accepted it than if you like had a bad attitude and didn't try to fight back.
Yeah.
Like, I mean,
I was kind of figuring out if they don't win like the next, or if he doesn't play in the next 2 games, I don't think
percentage-wise,
I don't think he's going to get to the Kellen 50 wins.
Oh,
sorry guys. I know everyone with true freshman wins that first game. It's like, well, here we go. I don't think it's going to happen.
Shoot. Well, now we can cancel the podcast because we're no longer chasing 50-3.
That was kind of one of the names we tried to boot that one around for the name. Like how can we do it?
It was just very focused.
They were grading our looks on a scale of 50. They're like 50, 3. Oh. But I guess if we want to kind of go off of that,
somehow we still got Camille and Lisa.
For now, no. But they go 50-3 from 08 to 11. Kellen Moore, Chris Peterson's the head coach. That's forever going to be the standard for some. And I wrote about it again. I wrote about it today with Brian Harsin. He followed Jake Plummer as a high school quarterback.
The old mongoose. And
he by the way, our friend Dayton mentioned there were 2 drag racers in like the 70s. Their nicknames were the Snake and the Mongoose.
What?
And so I thought, I was like, oh, it makes sense because the Cobra and a Mongoose. Oh yeah, it's like he's following Jake Plummer and stuff like that. And Dayton mentioned that. And I'm like, that would make a lot more sense because considering Harsin's background. I was like, oh, I had no idea.
Yeah.
Anyway, but like how he followed Plummer, but he also followed Chris Peterson, and that's a hell of a bar. And
Amen.
And Chris Peterson, of course, was in the news this week.
Yep.
Because he is stepping down as Washington's head coach. Stunning in that it was right at a time when I was seeing a bunch of fake tweets about coach stuff. So when I saw it, I was like, okay, this is it. I need to put my phone down and walk away. But then I looked where it was coming from, and I'm like, oh my God, this is real.
Yeah.
For a lot of us that have been around him, and I think even fans here weren't 100% stunned. A little bit. I mean, still figured he had some. He's 55.
A lot of the things that he said at his press conference, though, were some of the things that we have kind of alluded to over the years, I feel like.
And knowing about him.
Like Chris Peterson, it was funny, during the press conference on Tuesday, there was a reporter asking the question, and he goes, we don't know a ton about you as, your personal life off the field. And it just kind of it had me giggling there for a moment, just because I was like, yeah, it makes sense.
Yeah.
We know enough, but that's just kind of a more closed off part of his life, and he deals with it, coaching and stuff like that. And I don't think anybody, like, media-wise knows exactly 100% who Chris Peterson is off the field.
No.
But I still think, like, so many things that the way the story has been shaping up to be completed, it just made a lot of sense. A lot of the things that he said. I mean, we really have felt for a long time, like, I'm sure we've said it on the podcast at some point in time, whether this one or the previous one, and that's, we never thought that Chris Peterson would coach forever. Like, I mean, like, he's just not that type of guy. He's way more the type to retire a little early than let it drag on and retire, super late after the game just basically killed him.
He's gonna get out a year early rather than a year late.
Yeah.
And
in this case, maybe 10 years early than 10 years late.
Yeah, and that's fair.
Yeah.
But like so much of it too is like I'm hard pressed to think of anyone that would have had a negative take about what he's doing. I mean, you've seen Bob Stoops do it, saw Urban Meyer do it for whatever reasons.
There's some, I mean, just because there's people in the world that are interesting people, but about that, he's quitting after another, terrible season. He left Boise State after their worst season in 20 years, or whatever it was.
But maybe that's a reflection of how he felt during that season.
I really think that's the case. And I think it's just too narrow-minded just to look at the record and look at when he's made changes in his life and realize that. He is way more complex of a human than that. And I mean, I thought one of the interesting things to say that he said was he goes back to the Rose Bowl last year. And after that thing was done, he looked back and he did not enjoy the week leading up. He didn't enjoy the game. And he said, you're working your whole life to get to this point and you don't even enjoy it. And for somebody, when I say brave, by the way, there are brave people in the world that defend our country and the epitome of that word. But he's kind of brave in a way that not many people are, and that's just being open and honest with yourself and unafraid of change and realizing things like that. And I mean, like, who didn't look in the mirror after his press conference and think, maybe sometimes I take covering Boise State for granted because, 16-year-old Jay would have thought this is the best job in the world.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And sometimes, it can be a little bit of a drag on me, and I'm like, all right, got to push through another pregame show.
Yeah, and if you sit there and you're like, oh, I'm so stressed out about this. I'm worrying about this, and this. For a second, if you step back and go, like you said, like, oh my God, I live in a fantastic place and I cover a team that's very successful and people want to know what I say about that team. That helps.
Yeah.
And I'm sure for a bit Peterson did that. For us, we don't necessarily have to focus on this thing as much as him. Is the extraneous stuff, which we knew he hated when he was here.
Right.
The like not even necessarily the attention, not even necessarily that. It's the, you got 105 goofball, 18 to 22.
I love what he said about that, Dave.
Yeah.
He was talking about he's like, I love all my players, but let's face it.
They're a dumb bunch or whatever he said.
And he, in a joking, lively, not condescending tone, he said that. Like, he was like, but let's face it, like, they're the dumbest bunch there is. And like, I think he's just talking about 18 to 22, 23-year-old guys. It's like, if you expect all five or 105 of them to make the correct decision for the 5+ years they're on campus, all 365 days a year, that's not happening.
It's not happening. And it's like that, the old, the saying about don't underestimate one person's intelligence or the stupidity of a group of people. It's kind of like that, right? And so, but I mean, with that and like getting out on the road and recruiting and like, this isn't trying to be a condemnation of anybody because I still consider myself fairly young, but coddling them, like just like constantly showing them love and stuff like that. Because some other school is going to try to swoop in and take them. And he didn't like dealing with that crap. He didn't like dealing with, all the other stuff that comes with it. He has to be the spokesman for the team. He has to be the CEO. He has to be so many different things. He didn't like that. And I get it. I understand that. And his dream would be to just sit.
Coach.
Yes. Sit in a room, watch film, go out in the practice field, occasionally be around his guys because he really does like the players and like about them off the field, and then go home. Yeah, and that's it. Like
I think if he gets back in, I just think it's going to be a scenario like that where it is a little less. It's more it's something out of the limelight, and you can just kind of coach. And I always joke around about the time, like he was telling us that. There used to be a time where, when he was coaching, UC Davis or whatever, and he could wear a, Cal Berkeley shirt to practice. Yeah. And nobody would think twice about it. Right. And nowadays, everything's under such the microscope that it's like, why is he's not wearing Boise State stuff? Oh. Why is he not wearing UC Davis stuff? Like,
Buddy, people have gotten mad at us media people for wearing the wrong color shirt at practice before.
That's true, actually.
So
think about that.
That's all you need to know, let alone the head coach or worrying about what he wears. Do you think he's going to be an analyst on Dan Hawkins' staff then at Davis?
Yeah, right. I don't know. I'm actually most intrigued to see if it's truly away from football that he wants to make an impact now. Like, just kind of hearing him talk the other day, I think that knowing Chris Peterson, not as good as we do, but in the way that we know him, which is better than nothing. I really see him staying away from the UW football program in the.
It sure sounds like it sure sounds like he's just going to give it over to Jimmy, which is part of why he's stepping away.
Exactly,
he has a guy there.
He's not a guy that's going to make you live in his shadows,
no.
And maybe just because he was so good, you have to.
Yes,
but he's never going to be the guy towering over you.
I'm gled you mentioned that because in my story today, I did mention that Peterson's shadow still lingers here.
It does,
not because of him.
But because of the standard success, you know what I mean? There's a difference.
I'm sure he would hate that, but it's the truth.
It is the truth.
And
I also think, Dave, and it's just, again, this is just my feeling of the situation, is that even if Pete thought about hanging on for another year or two, I think in his mind he really thought Jimmy Lake was ready.
Yeah.
And that Jimmy Lake has passed on another opportunities to stay at Washington. And
Alabama put on the hardcore press this year.
Did. And I just would not put it past Chris Peterson to maybe realize all of it and think it's his turn.
Yep, I agree. And I think that's part of, again, why I think people haven't had anything negative to say about it. He does it. He leaves at a time where he has someone there who can continue somewhat his style of coaching and everything like that. A guy who obviously they first teamed up here in 2012 when Jimmy wanted to be part of whatever this whole Chris Peterson thing was. Yeah. And guess what? He's been there since. And
how cool is it that right now, almost a third of the Pac-12 coaches are his former top assistants. Justin Wilcox. You have
Jonathan Smith.
I just had his name in my brain, and then I forgot Jonathan Smith. And now, you have the head coach at UW that was under his direct tutelage in Jimmy Lake for the last few years. I mean, that's pretty awesome. I mean, that really, truly is.
Yeah, and then it's not the same thing, but you got Brian Harsin, and
and that's great too. I just kind of focusing on exactly. I mean, that's. You could absolutely throw Brian Harsin and a number of the other guys that have accomplished huge things. I was just focusing on the Pac-12 for a minute there, that he's gone and still he is tied to a significant number of the coaches left in the league.
And all this stuff too, there were stories that I know when national media would come in, I think Forbes maybe did a story about, they called it did they call it the cabal? I don't know if they did. The the think tank group that, or the team, or I forget what the hell it was called. But it was him and business leaders from around the community here, where they'd meet up once a month and just talk about ideas or whatever. That story was written 6 years ago. And now he talks about all that stuff about that's what he wants to do. Well, it's always been there. We always kind of knew something like this was going to happen. And doing something like that would not surprise me whatsoever.
As awesome as the people we live in this community are, and there are some unbelievably successful businessmen and women in this community. But think about the people that he has access to in Seattle now. I mean, I guarantee he's been out, and now all of that information that he's gathered, he's even more diverse and eclectic and all that stuff. And he's the guy to go out and get it too. He wants to surround himself with excellence. He says that, and those type of people inspire him. And I can't imagine the people that he's met that have led him to this point in Seattle. I bet you it's a pretty impressive list of people. No clue how deep it goes, but I wouldn't be surprised if, people from Microsoft and Nordstrom and Amazon and whatever.
Lives right on the lake in Medina with him with Bill Gates.
Yep. I wouldn't be surprised if he's met with those people and can furthered his knowledge of leadership and all that stuff.
Yep. No, I don't doubt it.
But either way, that's a guy that's going to be successful in whatever he does, and I commend him for doing what he did because. Hey, man, I'm not going to lie. If I earned my way into his position and could cash $5 million checks for basically a year as long as I wanted, I don't know who steps away from that. But he's a guy that he sees the forest through the trees. He's what did he say about that? The quote that he heard over the summer.
It was from Confucius or something. It says every person has two lives, and the second one begins when you realize the first one is over. Something like that. I forget.
There's more than the first one. Yeah, something. I think you got it right.
Something like that. And hey, was it Neil Young? Neil Young said, "Better to burn out than it is to fade away."
But Dave, who truly believes that stuff? Who truly acts on that stuff in today's world?
Nobody. Every single TV show gets a reboot. Everything like that.
Exactly.
Right?
And even in the employment world, we are all such gotta grind. Gotta grind. We're grinders.
Yep.
We're grinding.
Yep. And to what end? To what end?
Yeah. And for him to, I don't want to say this either, but it's got to be somewhat true for if you are as successful financially as he has been, it probably allows you to make decisions like this.
That is true. That's true.
I still commend him for doing it.
Yeah. And I just do think, if you think about, people love the Beatles. They broke up. Never got back together. So they're vaunted. You think about Barry Sanders. He retired. People are like, oh my God, he was amazing. And everyone's expecting he was the greatest running back ever. Why? Because he left at the top. If you saw a broken down Barry Sanders, it would alter your perception. I guarantee it. If you see Chris Peterson on the sideline at 72 years old, grinding out a season just so they can go to the Cheez-It Bowl.
Yeah.
Your opinion is going to change of him.
My
so him doing
question-
it now, I guarantee, as much as he's already beloved, it's going to only continue.
A lot of great coaches get compared to a guy like Nick Saban because he has done it at an unbelievable rate in the toughest conference for a very, very long time. And there are so many people saying that Bama's not going to be the same. Bama's going to be fine. Are you kidding me? They finally missed the college football playoff, and it's like the world's over. Still going to a New Year's Six bowl game, and they'll probably be back in the national title conversation next year. Like, don't be so short-sighted.
With Talia Tagovailoa, his brother.
But for me, I saw something this week about Tua saying, like, we're evaluating the future. Like, is he really not going to go to the NFL?
Because now he might be the 4th overall pick instead of 1st.
Yeah, come on. But Nick Saban, man, like, how many times do you see him like pop up somewhere on national television and look at him and be like, that guy seems happy? He seems miserable.
Absolutely miserable.
So why let it get to
Unless
that
he's
point?
eating his little Debbie cookies and that's it.
So why let it get to that point?
You shouldn't.
Chris, I guess,
And guess what?
I'm not putting words in his mouth, but it doesn't seem like Chris Peterson's going to let it for him.
Right. I wouldn't say Pete ever seemed miserable, but
No.
in 2013, his last season here,
He seemed different.
he seemed different.
Yeah.
A little on edge. Was kind of like he's done.
He
He's done
seemed
dealing.
like he needed a recharge,
Yeah.
something new, and he went out and found it.
and he's like, I don't want to deal with this crap
And,
right
and
now.
I know a lot of people say it was an 8-5 record that did that. I think
I said it was, I think it was a product of it.
Exactly.
And
Let's look in the mirror and see what's up. You know what? Maybe I need to change. Maybe. And his message this weekday was very similar to the message that he had back then. And I think he had a very good idea of who was going to take over at Boise State. He felt very, very confident that the program,
Was in good hands. It was
He
on a
said
good path.
better, but I think the point of it is that it was in good hands and had the chance to be just as good, or maybe going under a new voice, go in a better direction. Whatever. It's gone in a great direction since he's been gone. But now I think that he's echoed those same comments. Like he thinks that he has the guy in Jimmy Lake, and that Jimmy Lake will, transition flawlessly into that role.
The stress that I saw in 2013, and I hate to say this, I saw it after they lost to Colorado.
Mm-hmm.
It was just like, you could just tell he was just like,
Man,
what the hell am I doing?
Yeah.
Apologies to anybody.
that's when he
that
made
was
the
what did him in, and he made it after that.
And he did. He said 2 days before Apple Cup is when, so a week ago today, essentially, is when he made the decision. Right before Thanksgiving, he made the decision that he was going to walk away. Who knew? The only person that knew was his wife.
Barb.
My favorite part of this story, though, is that as they're waiting for kickoff of the Apple Cup, he's standing next to Mike Leach from Washington State out at midfield, and they're chatting before the pregame like they do basically every Apple Cup. This time, Mike Leach didn't almost choke on a banana and die. Have you seen that video?
See
that
a
gif?
3-year-old?
Yeah, I know. He's just hilarious. But apparently, Mike Leach looks at Chris Peterson at some point in time and goes, "How much longer are you going to do this?" And Chris Peterson was like, "Oh my God, he's reading my brain."
That's so great. We're talking about like there's a picture. I don't know if anyone can see it.
Mm-hmm.
I took this picture. I found this picture last year during in the Rose Bowl prep, and Chris Peterson has like a porterhouse in front of him or something.
Gigantic. That's the size of your head.
And his face just kind of looks like.
It's like he's got a cold burger from Mickey D's or something.
So when he talked about like not necessarily enjoying Rose Bowl week, I immediately was like, oh my God, I have a picture on my phone that encapsulates it perfectly.
Yeah.
So anyway, huge.
We'll tweet that out from the account just in case, by the way.
Huge props to Pete. But speaking of Washington State, real quick, possible Boise State plays them in the Vegas Bowl.
Yeah.
And this is where we're at with the CFP. Boise State.
We'll send you out with a bang on this podcast. We've covered a lot, but it is time to get into some New Year's Six talk.
So Boise State at 19, Cincinnati at 20, right behind them.
Mm-hmm.
If I had to guess before the season who was going to get the Power 5 or the Group of 5 bid, I probably would have said Tennessee. Or Tennessee. Can we erase the podcast?
No, Tennessee's in the Group of 5 now.
Cincinnati, just because of what they had coming back.
A lot coming back.
And I thought maybe they could run through their schedule other than Ohio State. I think they're a good team. But at least as the year's gone on, it's like they barely have beaten some crappy teams. We talked
They seriously have. They've beaten 2 4-7 teams by 3 points each.
Yeah, ECU and what the hell was the other one?
ECU and
Wasn't Tulsa, was it?
South Florida, maybe.
Okay, South Florida. Yeah, South Florida. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And so we talked to Kurt Apsey today, and there was a reason. We've all wanted to talk to Kurt Apsey. Mm-hmm. He wanted to talk about, hey, Mountain West Championships this weekend.
Yeah.
2:00 game, Hawaii. Fun. Boise State can win the Mountain West Championship. Mm-hmm. Cool. He also wanted to talk about the CFP.
Yeah, he wants to sell the tickets to that game, clearly. From our understanding, they're kind of trending towards what ticket sales have been in the past, which is, 23 to 27,000. I think the first year they went, they were slightly over 26,000 in 2014. So kind of trending in that range. I think that they would be gung-ho if they got to 30K.
Yeah, I think that's probably the goal.
Yeah.
That'd be my guess.
But we'll share that with you.
He said it's going to be 75, and I was like, in Honolulu?
But there was another reason.
There's another reason you want to be there.
He wanted to raise his hand, he said.
Yeah, I got something to say.
Yeah.
But the first question, I did ask him about the CFP. I did not ask him about the Mountain West Championship. Mm-hmm. And once he started going. And it wasn't like he went off or anything like that, but he stated his case.
He was well versed.
Yeah, he was disappointed in the in the rankings because it's too early to do it now. Mm-hmm. But you can see it clear as day. If Cincinnati beats Memphis on Saturday, they can jump Boise State.
They could. After further evaluation, before I'm going to say that, I want to preface this by saying,
upon further review,
we have no clue what the committee's thinking. And every time anybody asks them a question, they sit there and they act like we're going to give you this answer. And it's everything that everybody already knows, not actually things that are maybe tipping the scales one way or the other. Well, Boise State lost to BYU by 3, and Cincinnati's one loss was to the number 1 team in the country,
and they lost to Memphis, but that's ranked. They're ranked 17th.
Thanks.
Yep. It doesn't say it doesn't.
Thanks for the transparency.
Here's why that one's better than the other.
Yeah.
It's just you have to try to read between the lines, which is not what the point of it is.
So it's actually kind of annoying, but I do think that there is a little bit more breathing room between Boise State and Cincinnati than maybe it seems at the moment.
It's one spot, but it could be.
I do think it's only one spot, but I think there is a little bit of a gap there.
And behind them is just
not
a lot of obvious candidates.
You have to look at what's behind Cincinnati. Don't look at what's in front of them. Look at what's behind them. And what's behind them is a very average 21 through 25. You could maybe make the argument that Appalachian State should have been ahead of Cincinnati. App State's 11-1. They're playing for their conference title this week. They have 2 road Power 5 victories over South Carolina as well as North Carolina. South Carolina's not going bowling. Did North Carolina get bowl eligible?
They did.
They got bowl eligible, so that's a nice win. But I still think that they're just not going to value the strength of schedule out of the Sun Belt versus the American and the Mountain West this year. It just is what it is. After that,
Louisiana's good though.
After that, are you really going to put a 4-loss USC in front of Cincinnati?
Right. Yes.
No.
Yeah.
I think it has more to do with what's behind Cincinnati than what's in front of them.
So even though it's a good point, and also, obviously immediately the reaction was, oh my God. Mm-hmm. But as you're saying, not all gaps, even though if it's only one, are created equal.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. And that's what they've. That's what it's come down to.
Yeah. I have to imagine the gap between LSU and Ohio State.
Yeah.
Is pretty slim.
Yeah.
But the gap between, Clemson and Utah in their minds is decent. Or you know what I mean? If Georgia, I should say.
If this were court though, and you were, and you had a defendant, you could dip in, to the history books and find your case study that something like this, there is precedence for this, Dave.
The people v. BCS?
Yeah. A 2-loss team jumping a 1-loss team. What happened with Boise State back in 2014?
Oh, with Marshall?
Marshall lost 1 game that year. 67-66 overtime shootout.
Western Kentucky.
That was Western Kentucky, Dave. That was their only loss that year. Mm-hmm. Boise State lost. They got beat pretty good by Ole Miss to start the season, and they lost by 2 touchdowns on the road at Air Force. And Boise State, a 2-loss team, earned the New Year's 6 bid over a 1-loss Marshall. So again, it's tough to compare the two. Because you look at the rest of Marshall's schedule and it was very weak, but there's history that says, hey man, this could happen.
The 2-loss group of 5 has jumped to 1 loss.
I mean, I really think what the committee is saying too in some way is they aren't even counting the Ohio State game. Ohio State's won in the country. They've boat raced everybody. Like I really feel like they're not even docking Cincinnati for it.
Probably not.
I mean, we'll really find out if Cincinnati can win this week. And if they can jump a 1-loss Boise State, but
with Cincinnati, like Ritter, so the quarterback for like a month.
Yeah,
I saw some of their games. I'm
very
like,
average. He didn't start last week.
No, and that guy was awesome. It was because of injury.
Yeah.
The redshirt freshman Bryant, that guy was good.
Do we know if he's back this week?
Fickle said that if Ritter's healthy,
he'll start.
He's going to start.
Wow, we'll see.
And you know what? You know what that says to me? If you sit there and you're like, that dude was throwing for like 60 yards a game.
Yeah,
they barely beat Temple. There you go. Temple barely beat them. Dude's going to go out and throw for like 400 just because that's how things work.
Yep. I don't know. It's going to be an interesting Sunday. That's all I do know. And everybody's going to be sitting there on pins and needles if Cincinnati pulls the upset. I mean, if Memphis wins, there probably isn't even much of a reason to hold your breath. They have 3 very impressive wins. A 10-2 SMU, a 10-2 Cincinnati, and a 9-2, probably going to be 10-2 Navy squad. I mean, those are, and I really do think, like, come on, can we stop comparing value losses or quality losses? Or I mean, what does it even mean? Quality loss?
I thought that was something that wasn't necessarily supposed to be that big of a deal.
Yeah,
but it is.
But it's turned into a big deal. Like, people, I feel like, are talking more about the losses than they are about the wins.
I know. Kurt said he didn't want to like compare Boise State against Cincinnati necessarily, but he did say he's not sure 42-0 has ever been a quality loss.
Yeah, that was a little bit of a tongue-in-cheek comment because it was asked. He was set up to answer it. I think that you have to tiptoe around how you're going to answer that. But at the end of the day, tell me this, Dave. Like, I think the last time you really have to go to a game where Boise State was just – I mean, the Virginia game wasn't great in 16.
Oh, the one here?
Yeah.
That was 16? One of the worst games I've ever seen them play.
Was it 16 or 17?
No, it was 16.
16. But you know, you go back before that, you have to go back to Washington in 13 when 38-6, the Broncos with Joe Southwick were installing a new offense, didn't have a chance in that game. I mean, they didn't. But that was their worst season in the last 20 years. When Boise State has been in a position to contend for a New Year's Six bowl game, when have they ever let anybody down?
Yeah.
And maybe it's unfair to use history off of, you know, trying to evaluate what these teams are capable of. But, man, if I want competitive game, if I want people eyes on TVs, tickets going to the game, all that stuff, you can't completely overlook that. And Cincinnati's already shown, I guess it was against the number 1 team in the country, but they didn't just lose. They got boat raced. There was no need to pay attention to that game.
Really quick, do you want to?
Yeah.
We're almost pressed for time.
Yeah, we
but
are.
Just because next week we might have to be addressing this in a different way.
Yeah.
Missouri has a job opening. A lot of people are connecting Brian Harsin to it. There has not been any sort of substance to it, but it makes sense, I think.
Outside of just every Missouri paper listing him as a candidate.
Yeah. And
Which, why wouldn't he be?
And he should be. But it makes sense. He'd get a pay bump. It's not quite, like your old money SEC, college town. He's recruited somewhat in the area. He coached Arkansas State for a year. The thing I think is interesting is their AD was at Washington State, Portland State, and San Diego State.
Yeah.
And he's from Washington. So he's kind of
Familiar with the area.
aligned.
He also promoted Bill Doba to head coach at Washington State
And
and hired Paul Wolf. He did appoint Rocky Long the head coach of the San Diego State program. So I want to say that I love Bill Doba, Grandpa Dobes, best guy ever. Not my little grandpa. He just seemed like a grandpa.
I knew it. Virginia was 17.
But yeah, he's 1 for 3 in coaching hires. So
yeah. So anyway, that's a situation we will be monitoring. I asked Kurt Apsey about it today. He basically just kind of said that's something they talk about after the season. I think that wouldn't mean after the bowl game because hires move quickly now.
Yeah.
I would think if there's anything to this, we will be hearing about it this weekend.
Yeah.
That's my guess. If there's anything, one way or another, there's going to be movement.
There's going to be some smoke to the fire at some point in time before our next podcast.
Yes, and that's why I figured if we should just at least briefly mention it now.
Yeah. Big game this week. Bronco Roundup Game Day Show is actually going to have a special early airing, 9 to 10 a.m. here on KTVB. Game doesn't kick off till 2. Last time we preempted golf, people got really upset, so we're not going to do that.
Oh, look at you.
So we just have to go a little bit earlier in the day, and then we make everybody happy.
Stare the dancing gopher from Caddyshack. Make up for it.
Exactly. So I feel like I have to be. What do you got, Dave?
This week I did a story on Curtis Weaver and his shoe collection. That was pretty fun, talking to him about that. Did a story on Brian Harsin this week. That ran. Doing his feature on John Hightower. I know you and I are working on similar things with John Hightower.
Yeah.
I think he's this very interesting guy.
Find a little bit of the reason to his motivation.
Yes. He's a quiet guy, but it's a very interesting, uplifting story. If you will. Excited for it.
Well, sweet. Big week ahead. Hope you guys enjoyed this one. And until next time, we'll see you next week on Jay and Dave Sports Bar, serving the Idaho sports community.